Hello, my name is Matthew Waddington, and for the Jersey Legislative Drafting Office, and this video is about our work in our computer readable legislation project with the Singapore Management University team working on L4 DSL language. So this is our website. The Singapore team are the Centre for Digital Law, Singapore Management University, and they're conducting this research project in computational law. So the work that we're doing with the Singapore team will run in this year. It's now February 2025. It will run until June 2025. We have the plan for that on our OSF site here. There are links from our main website. And the plan involves various stages, but we'll report on different stages as we go along. In this initial stage, we've been using their system to look at the British Nationality Act 1981, particularly Section 1, Subsection 1, acquisition of British citizenship by birth in the UK or a qualifying territory. It's a British overseas territory. Why pick that? Well, it's partly a homage to the Rules as Code World's equivalent of Hello World, in that this paper back in May 1986 was the first time that somebody had used a logic declarative programming language, in this case Prolog, to analyze and encode a piece of legislation. To do that, they looked at the text of the provision as it was enacted, and it's a fairly typical nationality provision dealing with how you acquire nationality by being born in the country. But in the UK's case, you can be born in the UK and either one of your parents is a British citizen or one of them was settled in the UK, or at least that's how it was at the time back when this paper was written. They therefore analysed that and they turned it into logical statements, and they used that in their programming. So we've had a look at the British Nationality Act Section 1 ourselves. We produced a paper showing how you can carve it up in different ways. So we've tried coloured highlighting, for instance, but then we've tried different ways of representing the logical structure. So this is the provision as it is today, where it mentions qualifying territories. From that, we've gone on to do various things, such as turning it into an Excel program, which I'll show you in a minute. The idea is to stay faithful as far as possible to the original text of the legislation. So we put it into Excel, the ordinary spreadsheet system that any drafting office is likely to have in their office, and somebody knows how to use. We've taken the text and we just put it in there, but then we've broken the text up into different cells. The point about that is that we've used minimal violence on the piece of text. We've broken it up into as few pieces as possible, but in order to be able to turn it into statements in the same way that you do when you're quoting from an act. So you have a person born in the United Kingdom after commencement or in a qualifying territory on the appointed day. If you were citing that, you might cite it and it was to do with a qualifying territory case, you might cite it as a person born in a qualifying territory on or after the appointed day. You'd skip the in the United Kingdom after commencement or. So that's why we've broken it in that way, so that we can put it back together as a set of English sentences that don't have the ors in. We've split out all the different or possibilities. We've split out any and possibilities. Then when we put it back together, we only add the minimum. So we have these here. To make it into a question, is it the case that? To make it into a positive result, it is the case that, or a negative result, it's not the case that. And then if there isn't enough information yet, not enough information. What we've got here is this is taking each of the provisions that are in here when you carve them up into separate statements, and we turn them into questions. So these are the full set of questions that this gives rise to. And then in each one, we have a drop down for a human to answer yes or no, or leave it unanswered. And here we have a result. The result is thanks to a horrendous Excel formula. So Excel has formulas that will cope with if and or and. They're not friendly to be able to write. We're looking at getting LLMs to help us write them, but this is clearly not something that you would do on any large scale at all. This is purely an illustrative toy. The point then is that that formula captures the relationship between each of these provisions as set out in the original legislation. So if I answer that the person is born in the UK after commencement, and then I say that the person's father was settled in the UK after commencement, if you watch the bottom of the screen, it switches to it is the case that under section 1.1 the person shall be a British citizen. Again, that answer is just using the building blocks, the standard element, it is the case that under, and then it's using the cells to pick up S11, and it's using the cells to pick up the person shall be a British citizen. So it's not us writing that sentence, it is that sentence being drawn from the original text. If I say no to that, then there's not enough information yet. If I say no to this one, that the person wasn't born in the UK, and if I say no to qualifying territory, then it switches down here to it is not the case that under section 1.1 the person should be a British citizen. So that illustrates as a toy, if you like, what you can do if you break up the text in the way that we're used to breaking it up when we're quoting from it selectively, and you treat each of those as an element, and then you capture the logic, the if and or not logic of the relationship between the answers to these questions. So then if we look at what we've done with our colleagues in Singapore, what they've produced for us, they have a language called L4 in which they've produced something which is not like ordinary code. It's not complete gobbledygook to a non-programmer. It's written in a way that looks like English. It's also using indenting. in a way similar to what legislative drafters are used to. And it's using the ands and ors and ifs that we might use, and it's using mostly the same text as in the legislation. The point about this, though, is that you can then use that code to visualize the relationship between these provisions. So this is a map, if you like. You go from left to right. So the question is, can you find a way through? Any of these routes through will get you to British citizenship. Where the track parts, splits, that's an or, if you like. So these are alternative routes. And then these are alternative routes. Where the track comes together and you're moving on again, you've got to get through this, and then you've got to get through that. So this is an and, if you like. So it's quite an intuitive way of representing the relationship between the different elements that are in the legislation. So you're born in the UK and after commencement, fine, you move on to the next three. Or alternatively, you're born in qualifying territory after the appointed day, fine, you move on to the next three. Then if you pass any one of these, your father or mother is a British citizen, or they're settled in the UK, or they're settled in the qualifying territory in which the person is born, then you've got all the way through to being a British citizen. One of the issues with the British Nationality Act is the way that these provisions relate slightly oddly to each other. This is because it was amended after the original was enacted to add these provisions about a qualifying territory, which, as I say, is a British overseas territory, basically. The reference to settled in the UK or in that territory in the original is slightly difficult because that only applies if the person was born in the qualifying territory. It doesn't apply if you're born in the UK. But the way that the provision has been drafted, the way it's set out, it looks as if there is a valid route through it where you were born in the UK, you were born after commencement, and your father or mother is settled in the qualifying territory in which you were born, but you weren't born in a qualifying territory. So in the visualization, we've moved these together to illustrate the fact that they belong together. The moving around doesn't affect the logic. You still have to go through the routes in the same ways. All the arrows take you the same directions. But it shows you how you can then visualize it in slightly different ways, and you can emphasize different things. By the way, further down in the project, we want to get to the point, these visualizations are automatically generated from the code. We also want to see if we can get to the point where you do it the other way around. You can then type in one of these boxes and it will change the code. And ultimately, you can type in one of these boxes, it'll change the code, and then maybe it'll produce an English sentence that could be a starter for some legislation. So that difficulty leads us to think about whether you could redraft the Act to make that clearer. So what we've got here, this is the provision as it is now. This is how you could rewrite it if you were a legislative drafter coming to it these days. You might want to say, okay, there's a slight difficulty that it looks as if it's talking about a person born in the UK and their father or mother settled in that territory. When those two don't go together, that doesn't really add up, and that may confuse people. So you might think, okay, we'll split it out. we'll have two separate subparagraphs, one for people born in the UK, which is numerically going to be vastly the more common case, and then we'll come on to the less common case, where a person is born in one of the remaining overseas territories, which are all very small. And therefore, we'll be able to say, in the common case, the UK, birth in the UK, we're able to say, yep, your parents either got to be a British citizen or they've got to be settled in the UK. That's it, finished. It's only when you're born in a qualifying territory that we have to look at, are your parents British citizens, or are they settled in the UK, or the third possibility, are they settled in the qualifying territory that you were born in? So how would we illustrate that in a using the L4 visualization? And that we have here. So, and before we move on, by the way, this is the as it is at the moment. When another point about how L4 could help with visualizing while you're drafting is if you highlight qualifying territory there, it also then highlights all the other cases where you've used that expression. So as legislative drafters, we know if we use the same expression, we should mean the same thing each time. So that's quite a handy check on what you're doing. But so switching from that one as enacted, here's this to reflect that possible redraft that I showed you just now. So in this one, we've now got them separated out. So the qualifying territory is separate. That way, then, if we now press visualize for that, we get this result, which makes it clear that the you now have two routes through, in which if you take the UK, born in the UK route, then you head through just through either British citizen or settled in the UK. If you take the born in a qualifying territory route, then you have the three options open to you. Whichever way you get through, you end up being a British citizen. So just moving those around to make it clearer that they're separate. You can then see that they are different things. The problem, obviously, is that there are two factors that are repeated as against this extra one. So this doesn't necessarily, this is going to be a longer redraft, and it's not necessarily going to be as easy to follow as it might be, unless you're thinking, well, most people are going to just use the UK version, and most people are not going to need to look at the qualifying territory version. So I hope that helps to give some idea of how that aspect of it works. Just to come back to the other possibilities that L4 gives you. I mentioned just now the fact that you can have other uses of the same term flagged up. This also has, if you've got a defined term, this has a little, if you right click, you have a pop-up that says go to definition. So that then will take you to where the definition is in the L4 code, which is very similar to being able to find in legislation when you've got a defined term, where is the definition for that defined term. So, and that's something that we're looking at. It'll be the subject of a separate video. but we're looking at having that for the actual text of legislation as well. The idea that you can have a pop-up that takes you to the definition when you see a defined term. Okay, well, I hope that gives some idea of what it is that we're trying to do currently, and where we've got to so far, and where we might be headed. Please do look at our other videos on the Legislative Drafting Office's website. Thank you. I shall stop sharing and stop recording. Thank you.